My name's Will Evans. I'm chairing this session, the Farm Resilience Business Body and Mind session. Honestly, you speak at Positive Farmers once, and suddenly it's like the mafia. You can't get out. I'm a diehard Munster rugby fan. My daughters, they're all in love with the young man from County Cork who went viral at the ploughing for his love of all things slurry. So who knows where I'll be next year? Probably living here. But anyway, it's wonderful to be back, and thank you for making us feel so welcome once again. It's been a fantastic few days, and I commend the organisers. Sometimes with organisations in farming, you can do a session on mental health and suddenly they tick that box and then they never go there again. They think we've solved mental health. So, that resilience thing is so important, and really, I think it's really encouraging that this session's happening. We've got three fantastic speakers talking about business resilience, body resilience and mind resilience. We'll be starting with Dr. Nollaig Heffernan. Then we'll be going on to Roger Adams, and then we're finishing with Desi Fitzgerald. I'm not going to read a big bio from all or anything, because you can, the spoilers. So and without further ado, Nollaig, if you'd like to go up first. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. It's lovely to be at the Positive Farmers as always. And the word positive is really, you can feel it today. There's a great energy and excitement in the room, and people are happy and chatting and smiling, which is fantastic. So just to follow up from Will's comment, I'll describe you a little bit about myself. So I have 3 degrees in psychology. I also have a business degree. And typically, I pace myself before I tell people I'm a psychologist, because it has 2 effects. People either run away screaming, or they come and tell me everything about them, everything that's happened. And I have no problem with that. But there's some days, you just need to know where you're standing before you give that information. So what I'm going to speak about, I am a psychologist, but I'm going to talk about psychology in terms of business and business resilience. And what I want to say to everybody here is that you are so good at this already. So any of the things I'm going to speak about, you have these skills in abundance because you are dairy farmers. You work with animals every day, you do all the measuring and all of those things. So what I really want you to understand is there's no need here to reinvent the wheel. It's taking skills and understanding what the blockages are and the saboteurs that creep in when things don't go so well. And those saboteurs come in because you are human. Okay, so what I'm going to describe are many of the what are called cognitive errors. So I took a little bit of an official definition. So a cognitive error is a systematic deviation from logic, from optimal, rational, reasonable thought and behaviour. Now, I'm going to refer to a number of people who've already spoken. So the people who spoke brilliantly yesterday, and today I had the pleasure of being in Tommy Heffernan's calf rearing. No relation, just to clarify that, but we do have a shared interest in psychology, because somebody who specialises in calf rearing stood up and said, this is all about psychology, it's all about behaviour, it's all about habit. Yesterday I heard so many times people saying we drift. When things are going well, we get complacent. Why is that happening? They are very typical human errors. And once your attention is drawn to them, you'll be able to spot them. So I want to draw your attention to a couple of errors that, if they creep into your business, can sabotage you, but there are ways of stopping that. And it's not because you're a bad farmer, a bad individual, stupid, silly, or lazy. You are just purely human. And what we need you to do is think about the fact that you have to override some behaviours that you have inbuilt for a long time. So I work across all sectors, and every sector will say, are we the worst you've ever dealt with? Are we terrible? And farmers always ask that. Oh, I bet we're the worst crowd you've ever dealt with. I would not say farmers are the worst crowd I've ever dealt with. I am absolutely biased that farmers are exceptional. But they do have certain skews that have made you brilliant business owners and workers and individuals, but that when not managed can come against you. So I'm going to speak through some of those. If at any point today I say something that somebody takes personally, or it hits a nerve, I'd be more than happy to speak to you after the event. Okay? So, just to get through in what I want to speak about is expectation management, because I would say when I speak to farming groups, farmers will say things like, well, I'm a full-time dairy farmer, but I also run a shop, and I also do this and I also do that, and they have like 3 or 4 full-time jobs. Okay, that really doesn't happen in other sectors. One of the best comments I ever heard in a dairy group was somebody saying, well, my father's retired, so he works for me full-time, okay? So we hear all of these things. So there's a lot of and this ability to work, this work ethic, which by the way is learned. So when you're sitting there and going, nobody has work ethic, I can't find good employees, it's because they don't look like you or think like you. But the reason they don't look or think like you is because they haven't grown up in the same situation that you have. You all learned to work. None of you were born farmers, you were born into farming. And so the expectation within dairy is a challenge. The expectation that people should work as hard as I do. The expectation that, it's normal to work 7 days a week flat out. That doesn't exist in the rest of the world. Now, that is not for a second saying that people here are wrong, but what it's saying is there's a challenge with your perception of what other people will put up with. And so I'm going to challenge some of those and explain how they work. So expectation management is what I'm going to speak about today, because when you set yourself up to do something and you don't achieve it, you feel disappointed. And we can take that every so often. If we're in great form, we can take disappointments. But when you start getting a build-up of disappointments, that will chip away your confidence. That will undermine your resilience as an individual, and your business reflects you, so it'll undermine your business's performance. You also work with animals. We heard Nollaig Heffernan describing stress. Your animals pick up on your stress. You know, the day you're really stressed and all the animals seem to go haywire and you're thinking, bloody typical, the animals have gone haywire. They've probably gone haywire because you're stressed with them. So you've actually created that knock-on effect. So expectation management is really, I would say, one of the chronic illnesses in agriculture. And it manifests itself in the emotion of guilt. Okay, so unfortunately, one of the most common questions I'm asked is, how do I manage the feeling of guilt when I'm not working? And I'm going to help you with that today. We're going to talk about a few strategies that you can put in place to undermine those negative aspects of your excellent behaviours. Okay, right. So just a couple of definitions. Expectation, preventing disappointment by establishing in advance what can realistically be achieved or delivered by a project, undertaking course of action, etc. Okay. Now, because there's a huge work ethic in agriculture, and because typically in agriculture you own your own business, therefore you own your own time, when you're working for yourself or in a small group, it doesn't matter how long you take to do the task as long as it gets done. And of course, we know from Parkinson's principle in 1957, the task will expand to fit the time available to it. And so it doesn't matter, I can work all day. And if I can work all day, I can get lots done. We know from psychology research that the human individual is overambitious on a daily basis and underachieving on a long-term basis. And the reason they're underachieving on a long-term basis is because they have unrealistic expectations of what they can achieve on a daily basis. So I will speak to many dairy farmers and they will say, God, I was no good today, I got no work done. Fundamentally, and I keep coming back to this, there are only 3 things that dairy farmers need to do on any day fundamentally. You need to milk your cows, fed and watered and locked in safe. That's a good day in dairy farming. Because what are you? You're dairy farmers. Everything else is an advantage. Now, clearly, you're all going to kick back and say, well, that won't work. I can't just be milking cows and feeding. There are certain days when that's all you'll be able to do. And you need to stop yourself before you beat yourself up. And you need to say, I know I wanted to do 50 million things, but that's unrealistic. And given the conditions I had today, I have to accept that I did the 3 most important jobs I was able to do. That's a good day's farming. Now, that requires the ability to kick in something called System 2 thinking. And System 2 thinking is the rational brain. It is the human brain that makes us different from animals. So if we take up the idea of, so I do a lot of people management workshops, and I always say to farmers, people who work with animals are better placed to work with people than people who don't work with animals. You have a huge skill set from working with animals that allows you to understand people. The people in this room, you are far more like cows than you are like people when you're under pressure. And you know that. You know how cows behave. You know what triggers them. You know what sets them off. People are the exact same as that. And that's the System 1 is your survival brain. Okay? It's the one that just it's the basic functioning of the animal brain. And the System 2 thinking is that rational brain that can make decisions, that can delay gratification, that can read Paddy's slides yesterday and go, that makes so much sense. And they made total sense to you yesterday because you were sitting in a room ready and capable of taking that information. But if Paddy knocked at your door in the middle of calving and said, and you've just been hit with calf scour and the bank is on to you and everything else is happening, and Paddy said, but it's so simple, look at our equations. I've done it out on paper for you. You'd probably punch him. Don't do it, Paddy. Don't do it, okay? So because it's rational information, under stress and pressure, we will revert unless we are highly trained, capable individuals who recognize that we're in trouble and can step back. We will divert to brain one, which is more like the cow. So what I want to speak about here are the errors in thinking in the system one, so the animal brain, that once you become aware of them, you're in a position to undermine them and do better. Okay? So I'm going to go and leave you with some positive outcomes, positive ideas that you can work with. So I'm going to take this word, preventing disappointment. What is disappointment? Whenever expectations go unmet, we experience disappointment. The higher the expectations, the greater the disappointment. And that is why it is critical, and we heard it many times yesterday being told, this must be right for your farm. In psychology, we say you should never compare yourself to anybody else. You should only compare yourself to yourself yesterday. Have I improved? Anything that you heard yesterday or today, or you will hear today from the fantastic speakers on the stage with me, today for everybody in this room, this is a fact, is the first day of the rest of your life. If there's something that you are doing that could be better, that you'd like to tweak, that you'd want a marginal gain on, start now. Why don't we? Because once we come away from here, we step back into routine. So we need to put things in place that remind us to keep on track with the right things. And that's working with the brain. So I'm going to speak about a number of things that could sabotage your ability to perform. And I'm advising you to beware the saboteurs. And this is for everybody in this room. So one of the biggest challenges we have in something like agriculture is habit. And habit is a settled tendency or usual manner of behavior. I want to describe something that I see as a skew in agriculture, and particularly we'll speak about dairy. If you grew up in farming, the likelihood is you've been farming since you were 2 years old. You ran out the door to help mommy or daddy feed a calf or do something. Now, think about that. By the age of 18, you've had 16 years work experience when the average person is scratching their head wondering what they'll do with the rest of their lives. This is compounded by the fact that the human brain learns by a process of observation. Okay, theta waves in the brain, observation. So up to the age of 8 or 9, you don't even know that you're learning, you're just soaking it all in as a sponge. Now, because you've been doing it so routinely and for so long, you think of it as second nature. You think of it as easy. You don't even think about it. What am I talking about? You don't even think about it. You just do it. Okay? And that habit is brilliant and it will build a business, but we know that the thinking that got you here won't get you there. And the Irish dairy industry is now, and the UK dairy industry, and I work in the Australian dairy industry as well, the business model is you consume or you get consumed. So in reality, you're only going to get bigger if you want to survive. And if you're getting bigger, you can't touch everything. And the behavior and habits that created where you are today, they're not sustainable in the future. So we need to not vilify them and say, oh, we're terrible, that's the way we did it, or that's the way our parents did it and it's awful. What we need to say is they exist and how can we undermine them and fix them, change them so that they're better. So when we talk about, and it's a really easy sell to dairy farmers, because think of neural pathways as farm roads. Okay? Now, really well compacted farm roads. But if you've been farming since you're 2, your neural pathways are not pathways. They are deep, deep set ravines that you will refer to under pressure. So the human brain is designed to take cognitive shortcuts. Under stress and pressure, you will go to a cognitive shortcut. What's the cognitive shortcut? You'll do what you always did. You'll do what's normal. You'll refer to habit and routine. And we know with all of this research in stress, particularly from military, so that we know that under pressure, you will revert to what's normal. That's why you train in sport, in military, and anything else. You need to do it in peace times in order to activate that response in war times. So I was speaking to calf rearing today, and we had Gillian and Tommy describing about cleaning up your buckets and everything after you've used them. Don't just leave them there, that, you know, causing bacteria being spread is really bad for calf health. So part of that, if that's not, that sounds great here, but you've got to set up and maybe start doing that and learning a little bit of a routine even before you've had the calves, so that when you have the calves under pressure, you don't just throw it away, throw it to the side like you always did. You can stop yourself and say, no, that's not the right behavior now. And you can stop yourself, which is rational brain, and say, I know I don't want to do this right now because it's time consuming, but it's the right thing to do. That's a rational brain thinking. Okay? So when we're looking at the saboteurs, one of the things you have to ask yourself, and it's much easier to ask yourself this during peace times, so it's like now and before calving and at different quiet times of the year, it's putting in a review system that says, what are the behaviours? A great talk, I apologise that I didn't get into the land talk earlier, but I did go to Paddy and Pat, the two Pats were talking about talking about planning, and one of the things is reviewing your budgets, going back and picking dates. Why don't people do it? Why don't we do all of these brilliant things? Well, typically because we don't put a deadline on it. The brain is target focused. If you give it a deadline, it's far more likely to achieve it. When you give your brain a small amount of information, it has nothing to track towards. The brain is highly effective at tracking. Okay? So for example, we can prime the brain. If I said to you, if you decided you're going to buy a red car, you'd see red cars everywhere. It's a little bit like this. You might never have heard of anything, you might never have heard of something until yesterday or today, and all of a sudden you hear it 5 times in the next month. Because your brain has generated awareness, you can spot that idea. So when you're looking at changing behaviour, it is critical that you put deadlines on it so that your brain can track towards that. And across the year, looking at habit, if you want to make sure that your next calving season is better, you should do a review after your calving season to make sure that you do well in the next calving season. But put a deadline on that. Because talking about big things like planning and measuring and improving and being better, they don't appeal to the brain. The brain needs a lot more information. It's like saying, I want to lose weight. It's too vague. You have to say, I'm going to earn this amount of money by this date doing these things. And the more you do that, you can help yourself to create those habits. Okay? Another one that causes problems for us is the planning fallacy. And you'll all understand this because this is about being overambitious on any day. The planning fallacy, people underestimate the time it'll take to complete future tasks despite knowledge that previous tasks have generally taken longer than planned. So kicking off into a job and it takes longer than you expected, and kicking yourself afterwards because you realise it would take longer than you expected because it did before. But you're beating yourself up after the fact. That's going into the job straight away as system one thinking. That's the animal brain going, come on, let's just go and do something. The rational brain says, is this the right thing to do? Can we anticipate any blockages in it happening? So we need to be very good at thinking about what are the potential pitfalls. This is often described as a pre-mortem versus a post-mortem, imagining in advance what might happen. But you're brilliant at this. You are exceptionally good at this because you're always anticipating how will your business survive if milk price hits a certain amount, if weather does this to you, if something else does this to you. So you have these skill sets in abundance. But again, we've got another human error in thinking. Humans are extremely poor at transferring skills. What they see as applicable to one place, they don't see as applicable to the other. And so when I say to people, if you manage cows, you're brilliant at managing people, they're looking at me like I'm just insane. They can't see the relevance until you draw those connections. Of course, once you prime the brain to see those connections, you start spotting them everywhere. And that's one of the jobs that I do in the workshops that I deliver. So planning fallacy is part of that expectation management. You know, you look at the end of the day and you say to somebody, somebody's beating themselves up because they didn't achieve much. And when you say, well, what did you think you were going to get done? And they name the 50 million jobs they wanted to do, and you say, but you know you only had 3 hours to do that. That's not really realistic, is it? And they go, oh, well, I should have been able to, and I could do it when I was 20, and and it's bad that I didn't. It's just unrealistic. And so the next point then is that we start beating ourselves up. And the reason we beat ourselves up is because the visual nature of agriculture. I work hard, I see a result, I feel good about myself. I work hard, I see a result, I feel good about myself. You've been laying that down since you were 2 years old. Your parents have said, that's a great job done. Look at that, aren't we fantastic? Lovely, I feel good about myself. The problem is we have an irrational response to the other side of it, which is don't work, see no result, feel bad, feel guilty, feel useless, feel not worthwhile. If I say to a room of dairy farmers, what's the opposite of work or hard work? They'll typically say lazy. The opposite of work is not working. The opposite of work is rest. But if you haven't learned to rest because it's also a learned behavior, then you feel guilty when you do it, particularly because guess what happens when you're resting? You can't see results. One of the things that kills farmers when I say this, The most productive brain states. We had Michael Murphy give a brilliant example of it yesterday, the value of thinking, of decisions well made. I think he was up on 15,000 for a good decision made. Were you, or 1,000 was it? What was your number yesterday, Mike? 1,500. 1,500, okay, so a well-made decision. Now, milking cows, you have to do a lot of milking cows. 1 litre of milk does not return, you have to have a huge volume. But one really well-made decision is, life-changing. And so when you're looking at using your time effectively, actually the brain is in its most productive state when it's sleeping and daydreaming, which farmers see as not working, i.e. lazy. Okay? So we've got to challenge yourselves and say, where's a good time? If that's something I'm uncomfortable doing, how can I build it in? And I look at that as well. How do you build in these ideas if these are something that are so inbuilt into your brain that they are actually heavy ravines? The Zeigarnik effect, I'm conscious of time here, somebody should tap the time. I probably only have like 2 minutes or something left, crack through this. The Zeigarnik effect is another one that we need to be mindful of, and this is the idea that the brain copes better with closed tasks than with open tasks. So it's not the things you've yet to do that keep you awake. It's the things it's not the things that you've completed that keep you awake. It's the things you've left to do. So I come back to the budgeting workshop earlier, the cash flow workshop earlier. The drive to get that loan paid off as quickly as possible. That's because closing off a task feels much better for the human brain than the open task. What does that mean in farming? It means a drift in the farming day because, it's just 10 minutes. I'll just finish this job. I'll just finish this job. If you ever find yourself saying, I'll just finish this job, you need to kick in a mechanism that says, what's the worst thing that'll happen? Will anybody die and will I lose millions? The worst thing for most of you is you'll have to start it the next morning. That is not a bad thing, especially if it means you get home early at night time and you end up looking like a good place to work because you're letting your staff go home guilt-free and your family think farming is a great thing because we get to spend time with our loved ones. Okay? So the Zeigarnik effect, we like closed tasks. If we want to make use of that idea, a really clever thing to do is to assign less tasks to your daily work. Okay? Because then you can achieve them and you don't leave it open-ended. There's a gentleman in the audience today and he was talking about an employee some years ago saying to me, there's an employee who was 10 minutes late every day. And I was kind of like, are you splitting hairs? Is he a good employee? And he said, hold on a minute, 10 minutes a day, every day across a working year is 48 hours. In Irish employment law, 48 hours is the working week that you're accountable for. So in isolation, small behaviours are tiny. But you rack them up, and we had it when stocking rate, when Paddy spoke yesterday, the small reduction in herd size, 7%, had huge knock-on effects across time. So it's about understanding that the Zeigarnik effect, you're driven to finish tasks. Make sure you're finishing the right tasks. There's an opportunity cost with time. You spend so much time finishing finishing tasks, you may well be doing the wrong tasks, getting through tasks, but not the right ones. We can use something like task prioritization to help us to override that. So these are 3 saboteurs that you need to be really, really aware of. And I'm just going to quickly run through some of the ways of the antidotes to these. So in terms of creating habit, business awareness. What got you here will not get you there. Ask yourself, is what I'm doing right? Or is it because I've always done it? And is it the right thing for where I am today and where I want to be? Stocking rate. Any of these things that we've heard about over the last few days, what could be the difference that help you to be more aware, that challenge your own behavior? Self-awareness. How well do you know yourself? What is your tendency? Do you know the jobs that you go for because you're mere humans? If you write a task list, mere mortals will go for the easy ones, the quick ones, or the shiny ones. Highly effective people will go for the right job at the right time. And if they find themselves deviating into the wrong thing, they stop themselves and go, I know I really love to do that, but I need to do this. And once this is done, then I can go and do that. So that's the self-awareness. Do you know where your own blockages are? And then external input is fantastic because we can't always see the wood for the trees. If you've been doing that every day since you were 2, you don't even know you're doing it. Ask other people to help you. Children are amazing. Ask your children, when does mommy or daddy look at their worst? When do you know when to avoid them? That'll help you to understand your habits. It's also brilliant to go and speak to other farms and see what they're doing differently. Coming to conferences, all of these things are external input. To manage that planning fallacy, continuous review. Keep looking, build in continuous review into your system. Put it on the calendar. Whether it's part of plan, you're already doing it if you're doing your cash flows and budgeting and looking at it on a monthly basis. You're already doing it if you're grass budgeting. You're already doing it if you're reviewing where your stock is at any time. You do all of these things already. So it's just factoring it into your system. Continuous review, how could I do it better? The planning fallacy, task versus process. In every single sector, the most time-consuming thing that you will find in a business that kills morale and kills all sorts of things is looking for stuff. Are you the farm where when you send your staff to go and do a job, they can't find any of the tools? And when they dig into it, it's because you kept them in the back of your Jeep. Okay? Task versus process. The job itself is only one task in the process. Lean management would finish it the whole way through to the end. And that looks like you replace the tools ready for next use. How many of you have shadow boards? How many of you hold yourselves accountable to putting back the tools to where you found it? The task is only an amount of time in the day, and it can only be completed in that amount allotted to it if you are fully prepared for it to happen in that time. So if you've got 2 hours to do a task, you need to make sure that everything is available so that that 2 hours is available to do the task versus spending 45 minutes looking for the thing and then having to leave it halfway through, but not leaving it halfway through because you get caught by the Zeigarnik effect, which drives you to finish the task, and then that pushes the whole way down into the day, and you've just ruined another day and you're beating yourself up at nighttime. It all knocks on. And the discounted approach in planning, we know that because the brain is target focused, the less time you give yourself to do a job, the more efficient you are. If you've all day to do it, you'll take all day. But it's amazing, one of the best expressions I've ever heard in Irish dairy, it's amazing how you can get a day's work done in the last 20 minutes before afternoon milking or evening milking. Equivalently, you can get a month's work done in the week before summer holidays. Okay? Because there's a task and your brain is target focused and it can pace itself towards that. So remove the time available to you. Decide you are the farmer that's finishing every evening at 5:30, because that's what everybody else does. Don't push against it, don't fight it. Say that's a good time to finish. Now, if it's because you don't know how to sit quietly at home after 5:30, then pick up a sport or do something else that occupies your hands so that you don't go out and interfere with something that's already running well. And the Zeigarnik effect, plan for job completion. So that means you've got to have everything ready. Avoid multitasking. Multitasking is highly inefficient. It is cognitively very, very energy consuming. Don't have loads of tasks open because they'll wreck your head. Pick a task and work it to completion. This is also hugely well described in lean management. Stick to the plan. But I kind of contradict myself there because I say stick to the plan but walk away. And sticking to the plan would be I'm finishing at 5:30, which means I may have to walk away from that task if it's not finished. But it's the first task I will address the next morning. So resilience in dairy and expectation management. I liked yesterday, I think it was Deirdre Hennessy who talked about a call for action when she was speaking to John Marr and Fergal yesterday. And my call to action is, remember you are human. All of these things that you beat yourself up for and you hate about yourself, I'm late, I didn't get enough done, I didn't achieve things, they are your brain sabotaging yourself. Okay? But they're also the things that got you this far. So you are human. Just acknowledge some of those faults mightn't be working for you now and override them. Remember who you are. You are dairy farmers. At the end of the day, if your cows are milked, fed, watered and safe, you have done a very good day's work. Live with it. Pat yourself on the back and say, well done me. I had the pleasure of sitting at lunchtime with two very interesting gentlemen, and one of them was talking about regrets at a certain, come to a milestone birthday. And he said, God, I've achieved nothing, and kind of beating himself up until he stopped himself and sat down and looked at all the things he'd achieved. And it was a considerable amount. And that's to remember where you've been. You know, there'll be days when you've had it tough, but you've got through it. So that reflection, that planning, that looking back, that's going to help you to drive forward. For the people who suffer with guilt, really simple thing you can do. In the absence of an extreme reason to change behaviour, we need to create a reason to change behaviour. From sports and exercise psychology, put a rubber band on your wrist. When you hear, this requires self-awareness, when you hear yourself sabotaging yourself, I'm no good, I'm useless, why are you sitting inside, why are you resting? That's not what farmers do. You twack that rubber band. The brain is that special and that intelligent a machine that after 3 or 4 times of you having those negative thoughts, recognizing them and snapping the rubber band, your brain will inhibit you from having those thoughts. The brain is geared towards avoiding pain. And so that thwack on the rubber band is enough for your brain to say, stop having those thoughts, they're unproductive. It's a very, very useful idea. It doesn't work for chemical addiction. So for smokers or anything else. But, stop yourself. Engage system 2, the rational brain. Instead of beating yourself up with the animal brain, stop yourself, give yourself time, eat well, rest, all of those things. They are physiological things that can help you to perform and to optimize well, that you can control. There are many things you can't control, but you can control your outcome and your interaction with any circumstance that you find yourself in by just putting some simple things in place. I have just touched on a large and invested concept in psychology of cognitive behavior. I suppose it's a bit of a rapid fire on it, but thank you very much for your attention. And as I said, I would happily speak to anybody who may find themselves going through some thoughts during the talk that might like some further support with. Thank you very much. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Nollaig. That was absolutely fantastic, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions coming your way at the end, so please do think about anything you want to ask.